"Take us with you, we'll obey you forever," begged the three Apache women to the cowboy. The desert stretched endlessly under the blazing sun, its golden sands and rocky cliffs forming a world both beautiful and unforgiving. The wind carried a dry, hot taste that seemed to burn the throat, and the only sounds were the whisper of the wind through the canyons and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. In the midst of this harsh land rode a solitary cowboy, his horse moving steadily over the rough terrain. He was a man of few words, with weathered skin and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of countless experiences. His hat was pulled low over his brow, shielding him from the glaring sun, and his hands gripped the reins with a practiced ease that spoke of years spent on horseback. Every movement was deliberate, each step of the horse measured, as if both man and animal were part of the desert itself. The cowboy's name was Samuel Hayes. He had wandered the Southwest for years, following the winding trails and hidden paths of the desert. Some called him a wanderer, others a guardian of the land. He carried little with him, just what he could ride with, yet his presence had a quiet authority. Samuel was used to solitude, accustomed to relying only on himself and the skills he had learned through hardship. The desert had shaped him, hardened him, and given him a sense of clarity that few could understand. But even a man so solitary could feel the pull of connection when it appeared unexpectedly. Not far from Samuel's path, hidden among jagged cliffs and boulders, three Apache women watched him. Their eyes were sharp and cautious, reflecting both fear and curiosity. They had been separated from their tribe during a recent raid, a violent encounter that had left them alone and vulnerable in the vast wilderness. They had survived by hiding, moving silently from place to place, and relying on their wits and knowledge of the land. But as the days passed, hunger and exhaustion wore them down, and the thought of facing the desert alone grew increasingly terrifying. They needed help, someone who could guide them to safety, someone they could trust. And now here was a stranger, a man who seemed capable of navigating the very land that had become their enemy. The women were not ordinary, they were brave and clever, each with her own strength and determination. The eldest, Ayanna, was a natural leader, wise beyond her years and calm in moments of fear. Her sister, Naeli, had eyes that missed nothing, a keen observer of people and nature alike. The youngest, Chenoa, was spirited and quick, her energy and resourcefulness helping the group survive in dire situations. Together, they had endured hardships that would have broken many, yet they clung to hope, driven by the desire to survive and reunite with their people. Now, seeing Samuel Hayes approach, a mixture of hope and fear filled their hearts. Could this stranger be the answer to their prayers, or was he another danger in an already dangerous world? As Samuel rode closer, the women exchanged whispered words, cautioning each other to stay hidden. Their movements were careful, almost blending with the shadows of the cliffs. From their vantage point, they could see the way he navigated the rocky paths, the confidence with which he handled his horse, and the alertness in his eyes. It was clear to them that he was a man who knew the land well, a man who could survive in the desert where others might perish. Still, approaching him was risky. They had been taught to be wary of strangers, and history had shown that not every man could be trusted. Yet desperation had its own voice, louder than fear. Hunger gnawed at their bellies, fatigue weighed down their limbs, and the thought of wandering alone through the unforgiving desert was unbearable. One of them had to speak up. Finally, it was Ayanna who stepped forward. Her voice was steady, though tinged with fear, as she called out to the cowboy. "Please, sir, we mean no harm, we need help." The words echoed faintly against the cliffs, carried by the hot desert wind. Samuel halted his horse, raising a hand to shield his eyes from the sun as he scanned the rocky heights. The sight of three figures, cautiously emerging from their hiding spot, immediately put him on alert. Instinct told him to be careful, but something about their posture and the urgency in their voices suggested honesty and desperation, rather than deceit. He lowered his hand slowly, observing them with a mixture of caution and curiosity. The women stepped a little closer, revealing themselves more clearly. Their clothing was simple, worn from travel and hardship, yet it was evident that they had skills necessary for survival. Samuel noticed the sharpness in their eyes, the readiness in their movements, and the way they seemed to measure every step. He realized that these were not helpless individuals, but people who had endured suffering and hardship, who had survived where many others might have failed. There was a quiet dignity in them, even in their vulnerability. "Who are you?" Samuel called out, his voice calm but firm, carrying over the desert expanse. His tone was not threatening, but it made clear that he expected honesty. We are alone," Yana replied, her voice slightly trembling but clear. "Our tribe and we were separated during the raids. We have nowhere to go and we cannot survive here alone. Please help us." Nayeli and Chenoa nodded in agreement, their expressions filled with fear and hope intertwined. "We beg you," Nayeli added, her voice pleading, "take us with you. We will obey your guidance. We will follow you, please, sir." Samuel studied them for a long moment, his mind working through possibilities. He knew the desert well, knew its dangers, and understood that taking them along could bring trouble. But he also saw the desperation in their eyes, a reflection of the hardships he himself had known in the wild. The moment stretched as he considered the risks, the ethics, and the humanity of the situation. Finally, he nodded slowly. "All right," he said. "I can help you, but you must listen to me and do exactly as I say. The desert is no place for mistakes." Relief washed over the women, and even in their exhaustion, they allowed themselves a small smile. They had made the right choice, and a sense of cautious hope began to replace the fear that had dominated their hearts. Samuel dismounted, approaching them carefully, keeping a respectful distance. He observed their injuries, their worn clothing, and the supplies they carried, or rather, the lack of them. He could see that survival had not been easy for them, and that their endurance had required both courage and cleverness. He would need to guide them carefully, teach them what he knew about navigating the harsh desert, and ensure that they could travel safely. The first steps of their journey together were tentative. Samuel led the way, showing them paths that were less visible to outsiders, teaching them how to find water in hidden springs, and pointing out edible plants that could sustain them. The women followed closely, absorbing every instruction, asking questions when needed, and proving their quick ability to learn. As they moved through the desert, they encountered small challenges: loose rocks that could cause a horse to stumble, sudden shifts in the wind that carried sand into their eyes. But with each obstacle, their trust in Samuel grew. They began to see him not just as a guide, but as a protector, someone who understood the land and could help them survive it. Along the way, Samuel began to learn about the women as well. Yana spoke of her family and her tribe, of the traditions and stories that had shaped her life. Nayeli shared her observations and her understanding of the desert, and Chenoa's quick thinking often found solutions to small problems before they became serious. Each woman brought her own strengths, and Samuel realized that their initial plea had not been blind obedience. They were intelligent, resourceful, and capable allies. The desert that had once been a place of isolation and struggle now became a place where a new, fragile bond was forming. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert floor, the group settled near a small, hidden spring. The water was cool and refreshing, a rare gift in the arid landscape. They drank deeply, replenishing the strength that had been sapped by the harsh day. Samuel tended to minor injuries, teaching the women how to care for themselves in the wilderness. Around the small campfire that evening, a sense of cautious companionship began to grow. Stories were shared, and laughter, soft and tentative at first, reached into the quiet night. The desert, vast and unforgiving, seemed a little less lonely with each passing moment. By the time the moon rose high in the sky, the cowboy and the three women had established a rhythm, a fragile but promising trust. The women's initial plea, "Take us with you, we'll obey you forever," was no longer just desperation. It was the beginning of a bond that would be tested, strengthened, and transformed by the challenges ahead. In the vastness of the desert, under the canopy of stars, a story of survival, courage, and unexpected companionship was quietly beginning. White heavy checkmark word count. ~1, 320 words the next morning, the desert greeted them with a harsh, unrelenting sun that painted the world in shades of gold and orange. The trio of Apache women woke before dawn, their bodies aching from the previous day's journey, but determination shone in their eyes. They knew that survival depended not only on courage, but also on learning quickly from the cowboy who had taken them under his protection. Samuel Hayes had already proven himself trustworthy, his knowledge of the land and careful guidance offering hope where there had once been only fear. But the women understood that trust had to be reinforced through action, and so they moved with purpose, following his instructions carefully as they prepared for the day ahead. Samuel, aware of the dangers that lay in the path ahead, did not rush them. He took his time to teach them essential skills, beginning with the basics of survival in the unforgiving desert. "The land gives what it can," he said quietly, "but only to those who pay attention." He showed them how to read the subtle signs of nature, the tracks of small animals, the movement of birds, and the way plants and rocks hinted at hidden water sources. Naomi, with her sharp eyes, quickly grasped the lessons, noticing details that even Samuel sometimes overlooked. Iana absorbed the instructions thoughtfully, understanding not just the mechanics but the reasoning behind each action. Chenoa, full of energy and curiosity, asked questions eagerly, sometimes testing Samuel's patience but always learning. As they moved through the rocky terrain, the women's fear began to mix with admiration. They saw how Samuel navigated the desert with ease, sensing danger before it appeared and moving in ways that seemed almost effortless. His horse, a sturdy bay stallion, followed his cues with trust and discipline, a reflection of the man's careful and experienced hand. Samuel also observed the women closely, noting their skills and potential. Despite their vulnerability, they were intelligent, resourceful, and capable. Each had survived alone at some point, and now, together, they could become a formidable team if they learned to trust one another and work with him. Hours passed as the group trekked across the shifting sands and rocky cliffs. The sun climbed higher, casting long, hot rays that made the desert seem even more inhospitable. Hunger gnawed at their stomachs and thirst tugged at their throats, but the women endured, relying on Samuel's guidance. They found a small patch of desert plants, some edible and some medicinal, and Samuel taught them how to identify which could be used safely. The women listened attentively, careful not to make mistakes that could harm them. Each small success, finding water, identifying safe plants, navigating tricky terrain, strengthened their confidence and deepened their trust in Samuel's judgment. Around midday, they came upon a narrow canyon, its steep walls creating shadows that offered some relief from the sun. Samuel motioned for them to rest, and they gratefully accepted, crouching near a small rock overhang. While they drank sparingly from their water supplies, Iana spoke softly. "We owe you our lives," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "Without you, we would not have survived another day in this desert." Samuel shook his head, a faint smile on his lips. "Survival isn't about owing someone," he replied. "It's about learning, adapting, and working together. You've shown courage by coming to me and trusting me. That matters more than anything." Chenoa, her curiosity never fully tamed, leaned forward. "Why do you help us?" she asked, her tone both innocent and probing. Samuel paused, considering how much to reveal. "I know what it's like to be alone," he said finally. "This land is harsh, unforgiving. I've seen people lose everything because they didn't understand it. I can guide you, and together we stand a chance." The women nodded, sensing the truth in his words. They began to see Samuel not just as a protector, but as someone who understood the dangers they faced and who had the skills to keep them alive. Their journey resumed as the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon. The desert seemed to change with the shifting light, colors deepening, and shadows stretching longer. Samuel taught them how to move quietly and carefully, to avoid drawing attention from dangerous wildlife or from anyone who might not have good intentions. They practiced signaling to each other silently, using subtle gestures to communicate without speaking, a skill that could save lives in critical moments. The women quickly adapted, their previous experiences in the wild giving them an edge in understanding and executing the cowboys' instructions. As evening approached, the group encountered their first real danger. A band of wild coyotes prowled nearby, their eyes glinting in the fading light. The women froze at first, but Samuel calmly assessed the situation. He instructed them to stay down and move quietly behind the rocks. Using his experience, he created a diversion, throwing a small stone in a direction opposite to their path, drawing the coyotes away from their trail. The plan worked perfectly, and the animals followed the distraction, leaving the group unharmed. The women let out a quiet sigh of relief, their hearts still racing from the encounter. "See," Samuel said gently, "this land tests you, but if you pay attention, you can survive. Always be aware, always be ready." Night fell, and with it came the cool relief of desert darkness. The group found a safe spot near a hidden spring, its water reflecting the stars above. Samuel taught them how to set up a basic camp, how to protect themselves from nocturnal predators, and how to conserve energy for the journey ahead. As they rested, Ayanna spoke again, sharing more of her past. She told stories of her family, of the tribe's traditions, and of the hardships they had faced together. Nayeli and Chenoa added their own memories, each story revealing strength, resilience, and the will to survive against overwhelming odds. Samuel listened, quietly impressed by their courage and resourcefulness. As the fire crackled, the women reflected on the bond that had begun to form between them and the cowboy. Their initial plea, "Take us with you, we'll obey you forever," had been born of desperation, but now it had evolved into something more meaningful. They respected Samuel not just as a guide, but as a teacher, a protector, and a companion. They were beginning to understand that obedience in this context was not about subservience, but about trust, cooperation, and learning from someone who had proven his wisdom and skill in the harshest conditions. The night deepened, and the desert grew quiet except for the soft rustle of the wind through the rocks. Samuel watched the women as they settled near the fire, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. He felt a sense of responsibility, knowing that their survival depended on his guidance and their willingness to work together. At the same time, he saw their growing confidence, the way they had adapted to the desert and learned to trust him. It was a delicate balance, one that required patience, understanding, and mutual respect. By the time the moon hung high in the sky, casting silver light across the desert, the trio of Apache women had begun to feel a cautious sense of safety. The cowboy had not promised them an easy journey, nor had he guaranteed their comfort, but he had shown them a path forward, a way to navigate a world that had seemed overwhelmingly hostile. In the quiet of the night, with the stars above and the desert stretching endlessly around them, they felt the first real sense of hope in days, perhaps weeks, since being separated from their tribe. Samuel, for his part, understood that this journey would test all of them in ways that neither he nor the women could yet fully imagine. But he also knew that the bond forming between them was strong, a combination of necessity, trust, and shared courage. The desert had a way of revealing character, of separating the strong from the weak, the wise from the reckless. In these early days, he saw potential in the women that mirrored his own survival instincts, a blend of intelligence, courage, and adaptability that could help them endure even the harshest challenges. As they finally settled into sleep, huddled near the warm glow of the dying fire, the women whispered among themselves. "We will follow him," Chenoa said softly, echoing their initial plea. "He knows the land. He can protect us." Ayanna nodded, her mind calm but alert. "We must trust him but also remain strong," she added. Nayeli's eyes shone with determination. "Together we can survive. Together we will find a way." And so, under the vast, star-studded sky, a fragile yet unbreakable bond took root, a bond that would carry them through dangers, challenges, and unexpected tests in the days to come. The sun rose slowly over the desert, casting its warm, golden light. Over the rugged terrain, the wind whispered through the rocks, carrying with it the faint scent of distant sagebrush and dry earth. Samuel Hayes stirred first, as he always did, his eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of danger or opportunity. The three Apache women were already awake, moving quietly to gather their small belongings and prepare for the day ahead. Over the past few days, they had begun to understand the rhythm of life in the desert, the way every shadow, every sound, and every change in the wind could signal either safety or danger. Samuel motioned for them to follow, and the group set off, moving carefully along a narrow ridge that overlooked a valley dotted with cacti and scrub brush. He taught them how to observe the land from a distance, to see the faint trails animals left behind, and to notice the subtle differences in color and texture that could indicate the presence of water. Nayeli, with her keen eyes, spotted small tracks that others might have overlooked, a trail left by a rabbit, faint footprints of a coyote, and the broken branches of a tree that had once marked a passing traveler. Samuel nodded in approval. "Good," he said. "Every detail matters here. One small mistake could cost you your life." The women moved with increasing confidence, following Samuel's instructions carefully. Ayanna, ever the thoughtful leader, asked questions not just to learn, but to understand the reasoning behind each action. She wanted to be prepared, not only to survive, but to lead if circumstances ever required it. Chenoa, full of energy and curiosity, sometimes acted impulsively, testing her limits and experimenting with new techniques. Samuel allowed it, correcting her gently when necessary, understanding that learning through trial and error was as important as following instructions. As they descended into the valley, the desert floor opened up before them, revealing a mix of rocky outcroppings, sandy stretches, and scattered vegetation. Samuel paused near a cluster of shrubs. "Here," he said, "is a small spring. The water is not abundant, but it will keep you alive for a day or two. You must drink sparingly and conserve your strength." The women knelt beside the spring, carefully filling their canteens and drinking what they could. The cool water was a blessing, refreshing their bodies and lifting their spirits. For a moment, they allowed themselves to feel safe, even if only briefly, in the midst of the vast and unpredictable desert. Their journey continued, and Samuel began to teach them more advanced skills. He showed them how to track animals, not just for hunting, but also to understand the patterns of the land. He taught them how to recognize signs of predators, how to use shadows to gauge the time of day, and how to move silently across difficult terrain. Each lesson was a step toward independence, a way for the women to gain confidence in themselves while still relying on Samuel's guidance. Naomi quickly absorbed the lessons, her mind sharp and analytical. Yana carefully considered each technique, thinking about how it could be applied in various situations. Chenoa, though impulsive, showed remarkable creativity in problem-solving, finding ways to adapt the instructions to real-world challenges. As the day wore on, they encountered their first serious obstacle, a wide, fast-moving river cutting through the desert. The water was clear but swift, and crossing it would be dangerous without proper planning. Samuel studied the river carefully, examining the current, the depth, and the safest points to cross. He explained to the women how to use their canteens and ropes to maintain balance, how to test the strength of the current with a stick before stepping in, and how to support one another to prevent accidents. The women listened intently, nodding in understanding. Together, they crossed the river, moving cautiously and helping each other whenever needed. By the time they reached the other side, they were exhausted but triumphant, having learned not just to follow instructions but to work as a team. The late afternoon brought new challenges. The desert heat, which had been bearable in the morning, intensified as the sun reached its peak. The sand seemed to shimmer and move under their feet, making every step a test of endurance. Hunger and fatigue gnawed at their bodies, yet they pressed on, encouraged by Samuel's steady presence and the knowledge that each mile brought them closer to safety. Along the way, they discovered a small grove of fruit-bearing cacti. Samuel taught them how to harvest the fruit without hurting the plants, explaining which fruits were safe to eat and which could cause illness. The women ate sparingly, careful not to overindulge, and the simple act of eating together strengthened the sense of unity among them. As evening approached, they spotted a ridge that promised a better vantage point for the night. Samuel instructed the women to climb carefully, using the rocks and sparse vegetation for support. From the top, they could see miles of desert stretching into the distance, the horizon glowing with the colors of sunset. Samuel pointed out distant landmarks, a cluster of rocks that marked a hidden cave, a bend in the river that indicated a shallow crossing, and a line of trees that could provide shade and shelter in the coming days. The women absorbed the information, realizing how much the desert could reveal if one only took the time to observe carefully. Night fell, bringing with it the cool relief of desert darkness. The stars emerged in a clear sky, glittering like diamonds, and the wind carried a gentle chill. Samuel taught the women how to set up a secure camp, how to dig small trenches to channel water away from their resting area, and how to create simple alarms using stones and twigs to alert them to approaching danger. Each woman took responsibility for a task, demonstrating their growing independence and confidence. Iana organized the camp, making sure everyone had water and a safe place to rest. Naomi kept watch for signs of animals or other travelers. Chenoa collected firewood and prepared a small, controlled fire to keep them warm. The teamwork was seamless, a reflection of the lessons Samuel had taught and the courage the women had shown from the beginning. Around the fire, they shared stories to pass the time and strengthen their bond. Iana spoke of her childhood, of the games and traditions of her people, and of the values that had been instilled in her from a young age. Naomi shared stories of clever escapes and lessons learned in the wild, emphasizing the importance of observation and patience. Chenoa, full of humor and energy, recounted small adventures and mishaps, bringing laughter to the otherwise tense and exhausting day. Samuel listened quietly, occasionally adding his own stories, tales of survival, of lessons learned from the land, and of people he had met along his journeys. The stories created a shared history, weaving together the past experiences of all four travelers into a tapestry of trust, respect, and growing friendship. As the fire dwindled and the night grew deeper, Samuel reflected on the women's progress. They had already demonstrated intelligence, bravery, and adaptability, and he could see the potential for even greater resilience. Their initial plea, "Take us with you, we'll obey you forever," had been an act of desperation, but now it had evolved into a genuine partnership. The women were learning not only to follow, but also to think, to anticipate, and to act in ways that would help them survive long after this journey. Samuel felt a quiet pride in their accomplishments, tempered by the knowledge that the desert still held many challenges. The women, lying near the fire, felt a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. They had crossed rivers, climbed ridges, and learned valuable survival skills under Samuel's guidance. The lessons of the day had not been easy, but they had proven to themselves that they could endure. More importantly, they had begun to understand the value of trust and cooperation, realizing that their lives were no longer dictated solely by fear and desperation. They had found a protector, a guide, and unexpectedly a friend. As the moon rose high over the desert, casting a silvery glow on the sand and rocks, the group settled into a quiet vigil. The desert, vast and seemingly endless, was no longer a place of fear and uncertainty. It had become a classroom, a testing ground, and a place where courage, intelligence, and trust could shape the future. Samuel, the cowboy who had once wandered alone, now found himself part of a small, resilient group. And the three Apache women, who had once been lost and afraid, were beginning to see a path forward, a path that promised not only survival but also growth, strength, and the beginnings of a bond that could last a lifetime. The desert was unusually quiet that morning. Even the wind seemed hesitant, as if it sensed the tension in the air. Samuel Hayes led the three Apache women, Yana, Nayeli, and Chenoa, along a narrow, rocky trail that overlooked a dry riverbed. They had grown accustomed to the rhythms of the land, reading its signs with increasing skill, but today felt different. There was a heaviness in the air, an invisible weight that made each step feel more urgent. Samuel's eyes scanned the horizon constantly, alert to any movement, his instincts honed from years surviving in harsh conditions. The women, now more confident in their abilities, followed closely, silent and watchful. Hours into their journey, the signs of danger began to emerge. Footprints in the sand, fresh and hurried, caught Nayeli's sharp eyes first. She pointed subtly, signaling Samuel without making a sound. He knelt to examine the tracks, his experienced hands tracing the impressions. "Outlaws," he said quietly, his voice low but firm. "They've been here recently, probably looking for supplies or travelers. We need to be careful." The women exchanged nervous glances but nodded, understanding that panic could be just as dangerous as the threat itself. Samuel's calm demeanor reassured them. His quiet authority was a shield in itself. As they moved through a narrow canyon, the sound of voices reached their ears. Low, rough voices, carried by the wind, warned of the approach of danger. Samuel crouched behind a boulder, signaling the women to do the same. Iana, Nayeli, and Chenoa obeyed instinctively, their bodies pressed close to the rock for cover. The voices grew louder, and soon a small band of outlaws appeared, armed and confident, their horses kicking up dust as they rode. Samuel's mind raced. He knew confrontation was risky, but retreat could be just as dangerous if the outlaws discovered them in the canyon. Samuel whispered instructions quickly and clearly, teaching the women how to stay hidden while he created a diversion. He gathered loose stones and threw them in a different direction, the noise drawing the outlaws' attention away from their hiding spot. The plan worked for a moment, but the outlaws quickly realized the trick and began searching more carefully. The women held their breath, hearts pounding, as Samuel moved quietly along the rocks, signaling them when to shift positions. They were learning more than survival. They were learning strategy, patience, and the importance of staying calm under pressure. One of the outlaws noticed movement near the rocks, and for a tense moment, it seemed as if they had been discovered. Samuel acted quickly, standing in the open and waving his arms to draw attention. "This way!" he shouted, as if leading them on a chase. The outlaws, believing Samuel alone, followed him, giving the women precious time to move silently along a hidden path. They descended carefully into a narrow crevice, moving as a unit with precision and coordination. By the time the outlaws realized the deception, Samuel and the women were already out of reach, hidden by the natural folds of the canyon. Once the immediate threat had passed, Samuel gathered the women together. "You all did well," he said, his tone serious but proud. "Today wasn't just about avoiding danger, it was about thinking, acting, and working together. That's how we survive." Yana's face, usually calm and measured, showed a hint of relief mixed with pride. Nayeli's sharp eyes reflected the lessons she had learned in hours of observation and quick thinking. Chenoa, though still full of energy, had shown restraint and courage, following instructions perfectly when it mattered most. They were no longer just followers. They were partners in survival, each contributing to the group's strength. The afternoon sun beat down on them as they continued their journey, and Samuel decided it was time to test the women further. "We're going to practice something important," he said. "It's not enough to survive the land or avoid danger. We must also learn how to protect ourselves and each other. That means learning to move silently, use cover, and react quickly if we're threatened." The women nodded, understanding that this exercise was not punishment but preparation. They followed Samuel into a hidden alcove among the rocks, where he demonstrated techniques for moving quietly, using shadows for concealment, and signaling silently to one another. The women practiced tirelessly, their movements becoming more confident and precise with each attempt. Iana, ever the thinker, quickly grasped the strategy and even suggested subtle improvements to their approach. Nayeli's attention to detail allowed her to anticipate potential threats, while Chenoa's quick reflexes and energy made her particularly effective in simulated scenarios. Samuel watched them with approval, realizing that their skills were growing far faster than he had expected. They were becoming a team, capable of facing not just the challenges of the desert, but the unpredictable dangers of the world around them. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Samuel led them to a small, sheltered cave that offered protection from both the elements and potential threats. The cave, hidden by boulders and scrub, would serve as their camp for the night. Inside, Samuel taught the women how to set up a secure perimeter, using small obstacles and natural formations to create barriers and alarms. They worked together efficiently, each woman taking responsibility for part of the task, and by the time darkness fell, their camp was ready. Around the fire, they shared a quiet meal, the warmth of the flames contrasting with the cool desert night. The women reflected on the day's events, the tension of the encounter with the outlaws still fresh in their minds. "I was so afraid," Chenoa admitted quietly, "but following you, it felt like we could actually get through anything." Samuel nodded, understanding her fear. "Fear isn't bad," he said. "It keeps you alert, but courage is acting even when you're afraid, and today each of you showed courage." Liana and Nayeli nodded, feeling a sense of pride and accomplishment they hadn't experienced in weeks. The night grew deeper, and the desert fell into a serene silence. Samuel kept watch while the women rested, his mind alert to any potential threats. He thought about the challenges that lay ahead, knowing that this journey would test all of them in ways they could not yet imagine. The women, meanwhile, reflected on the lessons they had learned. They realized that survival was not just about physical strength. It was about intelligence, adaptability, and trust. They had placed their lives in Samuel's hands, but they had also proven their own worth, showing that they were capable, resourceful, and brave. By dawn, the women were ready to continue. Samuel had planned their route carefully, taking them along trails that offered both safety and opportunity. They moved steadily, the memory of the previous day's dangers sharpening their focus. As they traveled, Samuel pointed out subtle signs in the environment, bird tracks, the movement of clouds, and the way the sand shifted with the wind, all clues that could help them avoid danger or find resources. The women absorbed each lesson, applying them in real time, and their confidence grew with every step. The day passed with a mixture of routine challenges and unexpected discoveries. They found small springs of water hidden among rocks, discovered patches of edible plants, and navigated areas where the terrain shifted suddenly. Samuel encouraged the women to take initiative, to observe and make decisions based on their understanding of the land. Yana began to anticipate obstacles, suggesting safer paths through rough terrain. Naeli identified signs of wildlife that could indicate danger or opportunity. Chenoa, with her quick reflexes, helped keep the group moving efficiently. Together, they were becoming more than a group of travelers. They were a team, bonded by trust, courage, and shared experiences. As evening approached once more, Samuel led them to a vantage point overlooking a wide valley. From there, they could see the path they had traveled and the challenges that lay ahead. The women were tired but determined, their minds focused on the lessons they had learned and the trust they had built. They had faced danger, learned new skills, and discovered the strength within themselves to survive. Samuel, observing them, felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. The women had grown stronger, more capable, and more confident, and their bond with him had deepened. As they set up camp for the night, the group reflected on the events of the day. The encounter with the outlaws had been a turning point, a test of their courage, intelligence, and ability to work together. They had succeeded not only because of Samuel's guidance, but because of their own resilience and determination. The desert, harsh and unforgiving, had tested them, and they had risen to the challenge. The women understood now that their initial plea, "Take us with you, we'll obey you forever," was no longer just a request born of fear. It had become a commitment, a bond forged through shared struggle, trust, and mutual respect. As the fire crackled and the night deepened, Samuel kept watch once again, thinking about the future. There would be more challenges, more dangers, and more lessons to learn, but he felt confident in their abilities. The women had proven themselves capable, brave, and intelligent. Together, they could face the desert, the outlaws, and whatever else awaited them with strength and unity. Under the star-filled sky, the cowboy and the 3 Apache women prepared for the nights and days ahead, ready to face the challenges of survival, courage, and trust. Knowing that the bond between them was now unbreakable, the desert dawned calm and bright, with soft rays of sunlight spilling over the rocky landscape. The previous days had tested the cowboy, Samuel Hayes, and the 3 Apache women, Yana, Naeli, and Chenoa, in ways they could never have imagined. Their journey had been filled with danger, discovery, and lessons about survival, trust, and courage. Now, as they rose from their modest camp, the feeling of a new beginning hung in the air. Each of them carried the weight of the past, but also the hope of a future built on the bond they had forged together. Samuel gathered the women together and spoke softly, yet with authority. "Today," he said, "we reach a place where you can rest safely, but remember the desert never truly sleeps. Stay alert, work together, and trust each other. You've come a long way, but the final steps are just as important as the first." The women nodded, understanding that the lessons of the journey were not yet over. They had learned to follow, to act independently, and to anticipate challenges. But now they would see how far their combined courage and skill could carry them. As they moved through the desert, the group encountered natural obstacles, sharp rocks, sudden dips in the sand, and areas where loose stones threatened to trip the unwary. Samuel guided them carefully, teaching them how to balance, step lightly, and use their surroundings to their advantage. The women followed his instructions closely, their movements now confident and precise. Yana's thoughtful planning helped them find the safest routes, Naeli's keen observation prevented surprises, and Chenoa's quick reflexes kept them moving efficiently. It was no longer a matter of simply surviving. They were thriving in a land that had once seemed impossible to navigate. By mid-morning, they reached the edge of a canyon, its walls rising like sentinels over a hidden valley below. Samuel stopped and pointed to the valley. "There," he said, "is a place where you can find shelter and water. It will not be easy to reach, but it is safer than anything we've encountered so far." The women gazed down at the winding paths that led into the valley, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. They had come so far together, and the thought of finally reaching a secure place gave them renewed energy. With careful planning, Samuel led them down the narrow trails, teaching them how to use handholds in the rock and balance on the uneven ground. As they descended, they encountered a small stream trickling through the valley. Samuel encouraged the women to drink and refill their water supplies, explaining how to purify water with sand and sunlight when necessary. The women marveled at the simple beauty of the valley, the way the sunlight sparkled on the water, the soft rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze, and the quiet hum of desert life thriving in an unexpected oasis. It was a stark contrast to the harsh, open desert they had traversed, and the moment filled them with a sense of relief and gratitude. While resting by the stream, Ayanna spoke, her voice steady and thoughtful. "Samuel," she said, "we would not have made it this far without you. You have taught us more than survival. You've taught us courage, patience, and the value of trust." Samuel looked at her quietly, humbled by her words. "You've taught yourselves those lessons," he replied. "I only showed the way. You had the strength all along." Naeli and Chenoa nodded in agreement, feeling the truth of Samuel's statement. They realized that their journey was not just about following a guide. It was about discovering the resilience and intelligence they carried within themselves. As they explored the valley, they noticed signs of wildlife, birds nesting in the cliffs, small animals scurrying among the rocks, and even traces of deer along the stream. Samuel used these signs to teach the women more about tracking and understanding the land. They learned how to move quietly to avoid startling animals, how to interpret tracks and droppings for clues about food and water sources, and how to anticipate changes in weather by observing natural patterns. The women absorbed the lessons quickly, their skills sharpening with every step. Their confidence grew, and the bond between them strengthened as they relied on each other and their growing understanding of the desert. In the afternoon, as the sun climbed high and the heat intensified, they encountered their final challenge, a group of travelers heading through the valley who seemed suspicious and untrustworthy. Samuel quickly assessed the situation. "We must be careful," he whispered. "They may mean no harm, but we cannot be sure. Stay close and follow my lead." The women moved silently behind him, their training and experience guiding their actions. They avoided drawing attention, using the terrain and natural cover to remain unseen. When the travelers passed without noticing them, a wave of relief washed over the group. They had learned not just to survive the desert, but to navigate the complexities of human interaction within it. As evening approached, Samuel led the group to a sheltered area within the valley, a natural formation that offered protection from wind and predators. They set up a simple camp near the stream, using rocks to create boundaries and the surrounding brush for cover. The women moved with efficiency, each taking responsibility for a task. Iana organized the area, ensuring that everyone had a safe place to rest. Naeli collected firewood and set up a small, controlled fire. Chenoa prepared a modest meal using the edible plants they had learned to identify along the way. Samuel watched them with quiet pride, knowing that their independence and teamwork had grown remarkably since the beginning of their journey. As night fell, the desert sky revealed a dazzling array of stars. Samuel and the women gathered around the fire, sharing stories and reflecting on their journey. Yana spoke of her hopes for the future, of the possibility of reuniting with her tribe, and of the lessons she would carry forward. Naeli discussed the skills they had learned and the confidence they had gained, emphasizing that survival was not just about physical strength, but about intelligence, observation, and courage. Chenoa, with her lively spirit, recounted the small victories and moments of laughter that had lightened the journey, reminding them all of the importance of joy even in hardship. Samuel listened attentively, occasionally offering insights from his own experiences. He spoke of the value of perseverance, of the importance of respect for the land, and of the strength that comes from working together. The women realized that their journey had transformed them. They were no longer simply survivors. They were skilled, resourceful, and confident individuals capable of facing challenges with courage and intelligence. The bond between them and Samuel had become one of mutual respect, trust, and deep affection. The following morning, they prepared to leave the valley and continue toward a settlement where they could find lasting safety. Samuel taught them one final set of lessons: how to navigate using the position of the sun and stars, how to read subtle changes in the landscape, and how to maintain vigilance without letting fear control their actions. The women practiced these skills, demonstrating a remarkable level of competence. Samuel recognized that they were ready for the challenges that lay ahead, not just as individuals, but as a team united by experience and trust. As they journeyed toward the settlement, the landscape began to change. The harsh, open desert gave way to areas of greenery and fertile land. The air felt fresher, and the sense of danger that had hung over them for so long began to lift. Samuel pointed out signs of nearby communities, teaching the women how to approach settlements safely and respectfully. They learned how to communicate with strangers, how to ask for guidance, and how to maintain their independence while accepting help when needed. The women understood that survival was not just about navigating the wilderness. It was about navigating the world beyond it as well. Finally, after days of careful travel, they reached a small settlement. People moved about with purpose, tending to animals, trading goods, and going about daily life. Samuel guided the women through the community, introducing them to local residents who could provide assistance and shelter. The women were welcomed, their story of survival and courage earning respect and admiration from those they met. They had not only survived the desert, but had done so with intelligence, courage, and unity, earning a place of safety and belonging in a world that had once seemed overwhelming and hostile. As they settled into the safety of the settlement, the women reflected on their journey. Their initial plea, "Take us with you, we'll obey you forever," had been an act of desperation, but it had evolved into something far deeper. They had gained knowledge, strength, and confidence. They had learned to trust not blindly but wisely, and to recognize the value of courage, cooperation, and respect. Samuel, for his part, had found companionship, admiration, and a sense of purpose in guiding and protecting them. The bond they had formed was unbreakable, a testament to resilience, trust, and shared struggle. As night fell over the settlement, Samuel and the three women sat together, looking up at the star-filled sky. The journey had tested them in countless ways, but it had also brought them together, forging a connection that would last a lifetime. They had faced the desert, outlaws, and countless obstacles, and they had emerged stronger, wiser, and united. The women's initial plea had transformed into a lifelong commitment of respect, trust, and gratitude, and Samuel had found a sense of purpose and family that he had never known in his solitary travels. The desert had been harsh and unforgiving, but it had also been a teacher. It had shown them courage, resilience, and the importance of trust. It had transformed strangers into allies and allies into a family. And as they sat together under the calm night sky, the bond between Samuel Hayes and the three Apache women shone brightly. A bond that had been tested, strengthened, and proven unbreakable, ready to carry them through whatever the future might hold.